which happened in the life of Gandhi. Once a journalist asked Mahatma Gandhi, "What do you mean by democracy?" And Gandhi said, "Suppose you are making a running competition, and in the running competition, you came first. There are so many people, those who are defeated. You come back to the defeated people, take them along with you. That is democracy." And Gandhi makes a very interesting statement after that. That is, if you run alone, you will not win. You win because there are so many people to be defeated around you. It's a very interesting spiritual principle also. And this is telling a very important principle of democracy, that is the minority rights. We should not fall into liberal democratic majoritarianism, which we are seeing now, suffering now. And the second incident, Gandhi was in Birla House, and Governor General Mountbatten wanted to meet him. Actually, when Mountbatten reached, he had informed Gandhi that he would be coming. But when he reached, Gandhi was somewhere in a nearby village solving the problems of the villagers. Gandhi completely was involved in villagers' problems, and he forgot about the appointment with the Governor General. And he came back 2 hours late. Governor General was very visibly upset, and he showed his, disappointment or dissatisfaction. And he told Gandhi, "See, I am the Governor General of India." And Gandhi, with his characteristic smile, told, "But the country belongs to them. You may be the Governor General, but the country belongs to that poor villagers with whom I was spending time." So Gandhi was hinting at the next idea, that is people's rights. No democracy, no country, no ruling, no ethics will stand, no politics will stand without the people's rights. People rule. Therefore, the interesting aspect that runs through all the stories or serious efforts to look back on the ideas and concepts of Gandhi is reckoning sage who largely made the fortunes of political and social India on the one side, and on the other side is remembering the failed prophet of Indian democracy. Definitely, he's a failed prophet of Indian democracy. Look at our democracy now. Anyway, it is to be admirably remembered that Gandhi has encountered almost all the conundrums related to democratic and post-traditional socio-political coexistence. As Ramchandra Guha again has said in an interview recently, Gandhi's nationalism was democratically affirmative to the core, as it was essentially pluralist, and keeping the highest model of social freedom in its core. This is my rough translation of what I heard in that interview. It is this sense and ideal of democratic diversity makes him address the social and political concepts of his time from deep critical perspectives. The inner contradictions in Gandhi and the deep understanding of democracy, they come together to create a very important critical perspective. It is debatable. You may disagree with me. Fine. Such an endeavor makes him to strive for the principle of reconciliation of the political with the ethical and the spiritual. What we lack now. Ram Punyani reflects the same when he observed recently, as he was commenting on the view of some section of the people, writers and intellectuals who were labeling Gandhi as racist and casteist. You know, maybe 1 or 2 years back in South Africa, America and all, they demolished the Gandhi statue, telling that he's a racist. In connection with the Black Lives Matter agitation worldwide, Punyani writes, I quote, "Nothing can be farther from truth. These elements are not seeing the whole journey of the man, but do the cherry picking from his early writings. When he was in the early phases of his work against prevalent injustice in the name of race and caste." Unquote. Punyani continues to write, quote, "Mahatma Gandhi, the father of Indian nation, as the unique distinction of leading the biggest ever mass movement in the world and leading the strong anti-colonial movement in this direction. He contributed two major tools as the basis of mass movement, the one of non-violence and the other one satyagraha. He also stated that while making the politics or policies, what one should keep in mind is the last weakest person in the society. You must have heard of that very interesting argument, the weakest man, the last man argument. When Gandhi was asked once by the policymakers, how should we frame a policy for the people of India? He said, you look at the poorest of poor in India, the villager. If your policy, economic or political or social or whatever, it can wipe the tears of that poor man. That should be the ideal of your policy. His life, which he calls as his message, became the inspiration of many anti-colonial, anti-racial struggles in different parts of the world. He strongly supported the concept of equality in India, where eradication of caste also became one of the aims of his life. Unquote. Ram Punyani. So now let's come to Gandhi's principle of ahimsa as that which determines the borders of democracy. I define ahimsa or non-violence determines the border of democracy. It defines the ontology of democracy. Respected Chair, how much more time do I have?
Sir, you have more 15 minutes to go.
Pardon?
More 15 minutes to go, sir.
15 minutes to go. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you. So it may be commented that the observation that Gandhi's legacy will continue to determine the core and ambience of modern democracy it could be sometimes an oversimplified truism. It can sufficiently inform the contemporary thoughts on both the theoretical and political or practical concepts of democracy. The contemporary critics of democracy world over will be incomplete without Gandhian critique of liberal democracy. Again, I am a little tempted to say about Zizek. Zizek was saying the emergence of Taliban in Afghanistan is a very natural, spontaneous response against the Western liberal dominance. And he justifies the violence. But Gandhi was talking about this, the critique of liberal democracy, with a tremendous idea of non-violence. I need not talk to you about the nature of violence or the connection between Taliban and violence. I need not tell that. You know it. Gandhi's democracy and the new ideas of deliberative democracy are coming very close. The latest deliberative democracy, the concept of deliberative democracy, they're coming very close. And Gandhi was devising his idea of democracy, critique of liberal democracy in the last century. Don't forget it. Firstly, Gandhi challenges the majoritarianism of numbers in democracy. We have already discussed that. Gandhi achieves the ideal of democracy, which can claim its uniqueness, when he rejects democracy as majoritarianism of any form. Any form of majoritarianism, is to be questioned. Gandhi agreed to the popular ideal of democracy, where the opinion of the majority is counted. But he captures the core of democracy and the democratic process when he held the view that when a respectable minority the proximity to the above formulated and accomplished conceptual and praxeological Gandhi and Gandhian thought perhaps makes us to think that it determines the authenticity and seriousness of any theoretical engagement in India after Gandhi. And recently, one of my friends, TV Madhu from Kerala, wrote an article. Of course, it's coming as part of a volume which we are going to publish by Agar Books, for the George Sadassil is contributing, and many others. And he wrote, he was writing, inside the historical legacy of Gandhi, we can find out many disappointed Gandhis. Instead of one unique Gandhi, there are many Gandhis. We see in them a philosopher groping in darkness of the contradictions of ahimsa, which fail to answer the binaries of Hindu, non-Hindu, nation, other nations, male and female, dependency, independency, body and mind, tradition and modernity, etc. Unquote. But I put it. This is a very interesting observation. I'm telling that, of course, right from the beginning, I'm telling there are contradictions. But these contradictions are actually adding up to the fallibility or the concept of democracy. That's what I'm trying to argue mainly. But I put it in another language, along with Partha Chatterjee and Ashish Nandi, that the legacy of Gandhi and his principle of ahimsa is an all-time ideal for democracy, which constantly takes us forward to the post-national imagination. We have to move from the imagination of nationalism and cosmopolitanism. We have to think about cosmopolitanism and civil societies, and of course, an ever-renewed global and contextual democracy, maybe a deliberative democracy, contextual democracy. May I conclude with a story, a popular incident? You must have heard it 100 times, but still I want to repeat it. That is, actually, this is a very interesting story. That's what I just saw a message. That's why I was a little distracted. This story was said in many contexts. I am not 100% sure whether this is true of Gandhi, but I've heard it, I've read it. That's why I'm repeating it for you. Because people used to consider Gandhi as a sage, a saintly man. And ordinary people will bring people and ask him to pray, bless them and all that. And one day Gandhi was giving a discourse and one mother came with her child and she told Gandhiji, oh Bapuji, my child is eating lot of jaggery, lot of sweet. So Gandhi told, oh, very good, fine. You come after 2 weeks. After 2 weeks, the mother came religiously to meet Gandhi. And Gandhi advised, very seriously advised, don't take too much jaggery, sugar. It is not good for your teeth, not good for your health, etc. Once, and happily made this mother and child happy and allowed them to leave. Then Kerala, the secretary of Gandhi, came and asked Gandhi, Bapuji, you could have told this 2 weeks back. Why do you made them come again after 2 weeks? Then Gandhiji said, I also had the habit of eating jaggery, too much sweets. So I wanted to stop it first. Then only I would advise. I wanted to stop it first, then I will advise. I think there is a tremendous, very important democratic virtue in this. That is, there should not be a gap between what one professes and what one practices. A very important virtue. And second virtue is, I take the other more important than myself. I just don't impose my strategies to control the other. Of course, I'm reminded of Habermas. Strategy communication, instrumental communication. We should be going for communicative communication. So don't just reduce the other into an instrument or an object of my strategy. So very important. 2 works come into my mind specifically. I'll conclude. Gandhi after 9/11, I mentioned Douglas Allen. It's a very important book. And Gandhi and Beyond, Nonviolence for an Age of Terrorism by David Courtwright. David Courtwright tells us about the Gandhian legacy in the US. Martin Luther King, Barbara Denning, Dorothy Day, Saul Alinsky, etc. We know if you come to South Africa, Nelson Mandela, Bishop Desmond Tutu in South Africa. When we come to India, we have Vinoba Bhave, Sundarlal Bahuguna, Metha Patkar, and Vandana Shiva, to mention a few. There are so many people. If you go to Kerala itself, you can see, very important Gandhians, maybe some 50, 30 Gandhians are there. Gandhi's philosophy is to be worked, reworked, criticized, challenged, even his idea of democracy and non-violence, understood afresh by anti-Gandhians and pro-Gandhians alike. This, of course, I've taken, of course, you all think like this, but of course, Shashi Shegde, who was part of our webinar, he was telling this. He was making it as a proposal. Feminists and anti-Gandhians and pro-Gandhians, Marxists, and the post-Marxists, postmodernists, all of them should discuss Gandhi very seriously again. He can't be reduced into an oversimplified generalization.